Chola Banja Sanja Dubresho Sanja Chodan Onala Chodan Taja Chije Chola Banja Sanja
Chodan Soki Jonam Janju Bazu Jagi Gatsuchi Chokan Cholan Banja Sanga
Taya Ta Omo
Gate Gate Tara Gate Tara Sum Gate
Ta Omo
Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sum Gate
Bodhi Swaha
Tata Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sum Gate
Bodhi Swaha Ola Sota Adakacha Ore 당고 공원 주에다 심지어 탐지를 떠도 아니 톱자라나 마치바 산제에 고마는 뭐 진짜 토바샤 디체도 아니 배 자주스베 랍자나 수시는 양술랑 라와의 신고를 신발을推推胸만 놓아 가지고 아니 가서 봐봐대 다가자我说다가자 제 제세 정보 시와를 세베 아니 준주고 전에 제시도
And so we begin by setting our motivation, the motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the peerless state of enlightenment in order to be of maximum benefit to all sentient beings. To do that, of course, we need to be able to perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings in turn, we need to have a thorough understanding of what they are. And to gain that understanding, we need to be able to rely on a reliable, unmistaken source. And so it is with this in mind that we are here this morning to listen to a talk from the Bodhisattva's way of life as composed by the great Bodhisattva Shantideva.
탑절라 투제심보다 좀 아니 마샤자도 마차세다 또 마샤자도 바테다 간제 오카소레 저 셰제 차니 아니 예산에 영양자 같은 거 두세가 그래서 홍색이나 두세가 홍색 넘바 그렇 아니 데 꿀라 죽은 몸에 도졌어 무슨 말하라 쇼리오 사사와데 공바샤 아니 데 랑게 타고도야 아니 진짜가 막힌 거 심지어 탐자 마상와 매바지요 삼다 단제자 아니 가소래다 동해 소수 레두스서 동해 녀시 바가이 발라 나바 아니 가소다다 이네시 가서 진짜 남주
And so again, as we normally do at the beginning, at the outset here to help with our meditation, is that we visualize in the space in front of us, in essence, our own root guru, in aspect, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who is the greatly compassionate one. He has two hands. One is the earth-touching mudra, the right hand, with the left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. And his body is in the nature of pure, clear light. And that all around us are all kind other sentient beings, that though they are suffering the various sufferings of the 6 realms of existence, they are able to perceive within a human intelligence, and so they are present in this reality with us here now.
Duna said the Lama to the Ombudi, and to go the Jiwo Omgaba, Jamba Ambo, to a Hungos, Igasum just set up. To go home, we said, Patu, Meba Tune, Shinglamja, never Ishiba. Only the Java Gentile, Ishiba de Dakanja, Ukasura, Ishiba de Tuba Sanje Jumde, the number Gentile, Lama Shajas, the number Gentile. And only Ongo, Chula, but just no Mijo weekend, what did you go ship?
And the Buddha that we are visualizing, the greatly compassionate one, and that he is marked the 3 syllables, the white Om at the crown, the red A at the throat, and the blue Hum at the heart center. from this blue hung, and light rays emanate going out into the pure realms, inviting all the wisdom beings and empowering deities from their natural abodes. The wisdom beings dissolve into the main figure, and the empowering deities confer the nectar of empowerment, some of which overflows at the crown, and from that spontaneously arises Akshobhya.
What that and then also the Gomjan, some Tanda, the Ishiba, Kasodata, Jan and the Tim, the Jed, Namju Mozuta, Chikaso, Nego to combatant the Jaga to and Sanjay Kusun to do the Jaga to then the Chevakal was some down to the Payabuyore. Cook and the Chavina, Joe on Tambao, Tuga only was a part of Mebat, turn anything than Ishiba Jan, Tim. And one of two lamaches, Mikio, which that was about the shoes, Ishiba was called a shoes, some such ever, and around the Chilap Juela. The China, because of the Sanja Kawa in a shoe or the Inea, Maranzo, and Chica, Janta, Tim, Tendency, some such ever, and a Chilap shoe chata. And what is it? Mazupana, Kula Ramne, the Ramne, did it. Ramne, the Takaja, then the Ramne chicken, Kasodata, Namne Pati, and because of the Idamgal Hachigi, and Kasodata, Idamgal Hachigi Toneta, the Dojik, Connected, and Natural Yamsalane, and the Toneta, Ishiba Chandra, Tim, what in the Chen, and good Zachamuchawa. She demanded good and the Baja Nebalina, Janina, Janana, the Baja artistic social Jota. In a the artistic social Jota, social Joti, and a dealer ritual Jenny. And the Casoda and the Dakaja Jenny, and Ishiba Chandra, and what Dakaja Tim Jen, what are the Mevatsunjig Judge and what is and Zachamusawa. What are the Kaja goes to the condition and the some down to Bayina, around the Chilab Jueta. And what did they cover you? What are they done the Yamlet about some of the condition? What the near water, the travel goes on to the Mabuchigua. Chebakal water, then they check to Bayina, and around good Jueta, and Chilab Jueta, and saw you to Soyeta, and they cover you.
So this these small details of when we visualize the main figure in front, and then the visualizing of these three syllables of hung at the crown, at the throat, at the heart center, with the lights emanating out, inviting the wisdom beings and the empowering deities, etc. This is very, very important kind of details, and very important to be able to integrate this into whenever we are doing any practice in terms of visualizing a Buddha, visualizing a deity, whether it's through our tattoo practice or any other practice that we are doing. And so it is the means by which in way we can kind of consecrate the images that we are visualizing, and that gives the blessing that we receive thereafter that much more potency. It's kind of like making it that much more real for us, in a sense, that the actual the wisdom beings and so on that we are inviting are actually coming, are actually there, are actually dissolving into the central figure. And so for practitioners, it's kind of like using the different meditational deities that are part of their practice, and engaging in this kind of consecrating practice. It's a very, very important part for really, I suppose, connecting as well ourselves with the very practice that we're doing more closely. And so in India, Nepal, and so on, where we come across so many different...
What about that? This got the pen was a nego de Chavina, pilgrimage, nego and the combat the Chavina, Kumabuchi. And the Chavalango, some of the days down at Chihuahua, Tobacco, there is some time to go to some Tantuna, and Ishiba was shoes of the direction, Rala at Sosa de Janchiela, and Nubacha, you good one. Chilapju and Nubacha. And the Anish Bena was good over the Yamanata, good Ramneche, Ramneche, Chichio, because Shem Kukurade, the Baina Jagaina, the Vachina, Kusushi Joshua. Artist can switch it or Kusong switch it. Ina Yatang Aranzuge, Energy Sosuke, Sosuke, Energy, Yamlenga Tona, Takaja, Idam Hata, the Neg, and Yamnechi Chiban, only the Neg Ram, Idam Kurishan Chene, and a ritual Chene, and Ishiba, 위시바 젠다나 팀에 구라나 소소라 팀에 안 구도 자치고 소고요 봐. 오다 그러봐. 다 소다데 다 소소로 미바 그제면 내서 로가르데 얘나 다 지당도 된대래. 지당도 된대래. 다 이내 간사 소소 냠네 야르게 온게 아니 다 비달로 용구로와. 그거 내서라. 이나 가라서 몇바 이치게 수게. 몇바 이치게 수게 아니 지원 담아가 투가 홀레서 신라 이시바 뭐네 호라 패 삼사sem 아니 배 팀소 삼사체네. 어디에 제바 이나 아니 가서 다 나라 지랍 줘야 소사 tip장 줘다. 딜하 매딩 줄 소소 거네.
And so, for example, if we're on pilgrimage, traveling in India and Nepal and other places where we may come across and see many different Buddhas statues, and this is like from the point of view of the artists and so on, they are making them. But from our point of view, to be able to really make them that much more precious to us, to be able to use this kind of visualization. And to see how they are, in a way, kind of consecrated in this sense, is kind of really empowering them, making them that much more potent for us. And especially in the course of our own practice, and making all this our own practice as well, is that to make the process of accumulating virtue on the one hand, purifying negativities on the other hand, that much more efficient. It makes it a much more skillful means kind of practice. And so it's kind of like to, in the course of the statues that we may have, it is important that they are, as it were, blessed and consecrated in this way. So in the course of maybe tantric practice, where we may be developing or rising ourselves as the deity and so on, to make the atmosphere in which we are engaging in that practice that much more important and potent for us. Is this process of being able to kind of really instill the images that we are in our minds with that much more importance, that much more preciousness. It certainly puts an edge to our practice. But of course, the practice that one does therein or thereafter is kind of varied depending on the skills of the individual practitioners.
어디래자 아니 다 랑에 타고도 마게섬제 탐자다 랑주가 랑에 타고는 마게섬제 지워 뭐 투가 홍게 이거 좀 크게 어디래자 딱 이제 어디래자 어디래서 공부시 아니 되네 다 간제 간제 저거 아니 샘제라 다 샘제 아니 동에게 나출라 미네 아니 닌제 동에 나올라 미스베 닌제 아니 딜레 텐두게 잠바 어디래서 공부시 아니 동에 교대 제와시 다나 심마로 대화쇼제 대화 다게 치게 대다 전도만은 라마샤자 생각 친구들도 수 대화다 대외 교대 대화시 다나 치모로 대화 주제 대화쇼제 대화 다게 치게 대다 전도한테 라마샤자 생각 친구들도 수 아니 라마샤자서 구송도게 연대 대시변간에 아니 왔다들에서 공부시 아니 심지어 탐지게 아니 동에 교대 제와 대화된 예치게 대화 유다 제바체 때마다 녀치게 시간도 다 수도 지마도 보다 세버려 심지 탐대션에 심지 지기가 지금 가서다 타지마 제도에다 라는 거 자원이 메모데 못처럼 거와 다 술라도스나 아니 라는 둘라 스트랑게 둘라 세트베 아니 라마샤자 생겼지 심지도 투게 라라라 뭐바서 산지 왔다 공개 공부했더니 아니 뒤에 감다 메바서 발라내와 지다 와신의 계획 요반인자 아니 센쟁을 되는데 배면 흔들 두고 정거 열어 what are the Tati Koma Madonna Tamada Toba jeans? And what did the Komasha?
So we visualize all the kind mother sentient beings all around us as are similarly being marked by the home, and that they are, of course, suffering. There are different sufferings relative to the realms that they are in, and because of that, it automatically inspires compassion in us for that suffering, and that and of course then reminds us to cultivate the loving kindness and feeling that sense of closeness and fondness for all sentient beings. And that we really feel how wonderful it would be if they could be free from that suffering and the causes of that suffering. How wonderful it would be if they had happiness and the causes of happiness. We pray that that is the case, and we really really see how, I need to take a kind of sense of responsibility regarding that exalted intention of really feeling that I need to be doing something about this myself, and that here, we contemplate the qualities of a Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and that really seeing how the Buddha himself, he cultivated the mind of enlightenment, trained on the path, and used that to cultivate all the necessary merit and so on to achieve full and complete enlightenment. And that I see that in the sense of my wishing to benefit all sentient beings in these ways of removing all suffering and placing them in every happiness. I can't even do that for one now, but I see that example of the Buddha, the Buddha's enlightenment, of attaining enlightenment, as the quintessential kind of example that I must follow. And so therefore I vow to attain the state of enlightenment myself in order to be able to fulfill this goal I have of placing all sentient beings in happiness and removing them from all suffering.
Well, so what the conversation and teacher to yes, that's some Lama Shajas and Kuma to actually so what the conversation and send you check what the many cover some cover
the Napchu Napchuk, Napchu Napchuk, and the death roller Shiba. Dikbe Jikbe Sul Sam Lala Shi.
Nothing I do.
Nothing up truck. 56.
What the oh yeah, well, that what the channel.
So again, I was just saying there to ensure that we have really this kind of motivation, as has just been described, for listening to what follows now this morning. That this is important to kind of really sustain that determination to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all.
What the cousin of something about Shishanata, Shiba Digbe as a jigbe to Sambala Shista, what Chiba Sambala Shisha, Tella number magic, that Tella Rata Tella number magic, Tibja Pama Chato, Yube, never Chishin, Digwa the Jeshin do and Chive and Chiwacha. Digwa Matana said the need to ya Dungan Yong, Digwa Matana said the need to ya Dungan Yongova. And
so in terms of the next outline, we're looking at a fourth outline where it talks about how to reflect really on the fear arising from the reality of our negativities. And this has four subsections or subheadings. The first is pointing out that in our lifespan, nothing is ever being added to it, and it is always ebbing away, and that should make it's clear that therefore death is definite. But in spite of that, if we die with these negativities on our mind stream, that's going to bring forth a tremendous fear and terror. The second is that if we do not purify our negativities, then even in this life, we will have to undergo suffering. And the third is that the reasoning behind why great fear arises. And fourth is that also we are tormented by suffering that we will have to undergo in the future.
치워도 치마도 간지 밑에 맞서도 라브리나라 sabja 숨주 쓰고 요와 와다대자다 치워냐마 루와 셀라 세마 리바시도다 지붕고 요래 루와 지붕고래 아니 세 넘버니 요요 말 어디 쓰고 요라다 셀라 넘버 매제 집제 발매쳐도 이베 네버 치신 네버 치죠 다 대과자 제신도 치바이나다 담아타도 녀손을 게임에도 매딩 소차도 하다 같이 대과자 제신도 치바이나다 될 지네 Kasana, Gawa Chimadilla, and a Digba Pang, Gawa Dukta and Ludesh, Togu, you made a Tesumrua. Tesumre. Kasana, Tanda was a Mijin theatre, me, Namju the color, Namju the Nature, you have a layer, and Digba Pang, the Gawa to be a Nuaka. That dig me, some of the Palani. When Yawa the Italic Gawa in an Tapshikora Memory. Rua? That didn't do like Gawa in a leisure table watch and Tapshimindua. That Mila Gawa in by the Tandanga me neta de la teta. That's Sebura. Michium neta. And another church to be killing it when the Teva in a Tiba the Gawa to belong to Cassis Chetudo. She would Zata watch it one. What that is what that is. There's the name by Inza, tell a number major to Palma shed. You bring never cheating. And the weather Jeva cheer at the top. The Chiba, the weather Jen cheering, but touch or that did Chiba in a Dakar yesterday. But Zata would have what did she tell us that Chiban is a Ninsen, that would Ninsen Deva Yumila. Teddy Dado, Gujursing. Number Gwina woman, Dada Chiwa Chimi Jursa.
And so this first subheading is really a very, very key point, as they are in a way. But when we look at the stark reality that the time of our life is always ebbing away and nothing is being added to it, which is it should make it clear that death is definite, and the kind of ramifications of that should be very obvious to us. And yet there's this kind of like fear, this terror that can arise because we still know we have negativities on our mind stream at the time of death. And so it's kind of like really saying that, to first of all appreciate, first and foremost, that as a human being, you have this capacity to purify and negativity and to accumulate positive merit. If you were to be born in the hell realms or in the spirit realms, you would have extremely little opportunity. And as an animal, you're beset by benighted ignorance, and so there really is no chance if we happen to fall into those lower realms. And so one should doubly appreciate the sense of opportunity that one has here, especially since we have some appreciation of the Buddha Dharma, we have some knowledge of the process of purification and so on. And therefore, we should do whatever we possibly can now to purify when we have the capacity to do so. That's what it's saying. And so this reads verse number 39, which says, remaining neither day nor night, life is always slipping by and never getting any longer. Why will death not come to one like me?
Right. Gazada, Ninsen Deva Yumelasta, Ninda Senta, due to Kadechiba in Ninsen Kadechiba and Kijija, and Deva Yumelasta, the Lechi Castle Ninse Kijija, and Takaja Casada, Parmacha, Mutuneta, Chivi Choso Totic Yorba. Narato Niesu Jagu Yore, Konda Negi Yore, and a holiday to Yore, Karijeva in a Karijeva. Chive to the lam yet and yeta. Togu Yoramato, lam yet a manto, a Kayo Marmota. Kayo Marta, and Judge Cosa Pena Sani Suzu Dumbala, Casa that death sentence jail Michi Imbayina. That she got the second read and the lam yet and yet to Yorba. Did not hear Jerva, Tangarazon. Nangme shon de deri yormento pena sani death sentence chuju dumbal death sentence ingide sani sokdo nyeba yugede sani chuju dumba bodo gugabswa ngarantura dia yomara tangbo samada chiwa nyeba namchi nyeme sumu yorwa tende za tangbo chede to ta ga ina mena pena chuju dumbal chi sokdo ta jimba ina ko second rate jode ko lam nyede jode yorba da nyeda wadache ko tende ke tos ke dege tende lam nyeda mandro ye dege tu pat kama che yomara kama za second che yomara ta karcha che yomara wa tende za nyenze keje ja deba yomela ta de medigen de je medigen med ka Deba Yomela, Yomarwata, did a Google meeting. Mebate, Debe Ome by us a Derek around making. And Sugan got to a medic. Onja Chengi Kiabuta of the Kikap, Kazatop Chemo, the water, got to a medic. Then they got to own me about some. Said the Tado, Guebe, the Tiber Jura, Guebe, the Tiber, by the Rokas Logi, Tawase, Tawegi, Takanjaji, interchange, because of them. 2000 딱까지 니마서 니메게 추주게 까마서 까마게 세컨 바이 딥도 도 딥을 주신 다 되네 딥데가 데이터 막 구도가 넘버 구네 그 구도인데 야 태바지 디바지 용대제 매되겠지 넘버 교시 넘버 구네 대 로네서 중세 잠양 오면나 다 중세 잠양 용해지 매바 이나 다다 치와 준세 치미 주다 다 소소 치와지 가르치는 용어 말했어 미주대 예버 치외다 뒤즈 말에나 나사 정말에 메세나 준비 자에다 지은 것들 세령다 또 있겠자 말이야 그 뒤즈 말에 바살라들 어느 거 깽게 온게 마시에 탑시 다한테 지에도와 되네 지에도와 다 되네 뒤즈 레사소나 아니 강기가 마페 용구도와 되네 인자 중세자야 오면나 다도 치와 치와에서 존재 지미주들 같은 치와 용거 말 미주들 예벌 치외 안에 디바 정말 배워서 다 되네 임바서 예벌 치고 여바 임바 인자 안에 그 디바디 사사는 맞아 안에네 그 가서 됐다 예바도 제부 용구 요래 안디 임바 인자 치니 매번에 차두고 깨와치 링거 요래 안에 디테도 레상에 오게 동네데 대도 용되고 요도 딱 나라도 링게데 가래 레스폰시빌리티 가래서는 디바 정말 배주지고 했어. 그런 예벌 치베 디바 정말 배벌 잡고스. 셔버쳐.
So again, this verse is really hammering home the point that that regardless of who we are, that the single kind of leveler is that death is going to come. It is absolutely definite that, as we know in the teachings on death, that death is definite, the time of death is indefinite, and only our spiritual practice will be a benefit to us at that time. Here, it's pointing out the kind of the inevitability that nothing is being added into our day and night. That time is always running out, and we cannot have no power which to halt it or to interrupt this process or to delay this process. So it's kind of like saying that our life is, the one certainty is that our life is slipping away, and that this is nothing at all. There's not a single moment that can be revisited again after it is gone. And so here that it shows that death is definitely on its way. And so therefore, why would it not come for me? That I'm no different, and that even if the powerful, the kings and so on of this world have no power to put a stop to it, then why would it not come to me? And it's like, this is an inevitable death sentence. If we had, a death sentence in this world where we were condemned to be executed at 7 a.m. the next morning, you would say, there's nothing that can be done really, but at least they can make something happen before 7 a.m. Maybe I get a reprieve or some sort of leniency. But in terms of death, there's no kind of dealing with, there's no negotiating with death. That one's time is always running out. And no matter what else we are doing, we may take a break at the end of the day, we may take a holiday and get a break for ourselves. But even during that time, the sands of time are still running out for us. So this is the kind of like stark reality. And so we have to be kind of like very, very aware of this. And that at the point of death, medicine may in any ways kind of delay the inevitable, but it cannot stop when the results have ripened into that time of death. And so here we have to consider what kind of results will follow after we pass away, and to be able to start to do something about them now. And this is the crux of this verse, that thinking on this, meditating on this, is in order to make it clear to us that we must take responsibility, and we take responsibility by purifying, making efforts to purify our negativities now.
지다 잠불에 들어가서 맨다 되게 튕겨 야다 저에다 아니 지금 되는 망부지 유연에 아니 지금 또저 녀마지다 또 세정화 되고 근데 저 초구요래 이내디 내당군에도 가려서 내당군에도 녀마이나 아니 지금 가서다 튕겨 마상 온게 아니 깽게 온게 시저와 망부요다 튕겨 야가요나 되게 깽게 온게 시저에 또 눈도 차두고 와 아니 된대서 이내야 다 간자 지금 깽게 도다 매경지 도다 매경게 당군에 뒤군에 량어도 수강에 잡두고면 도 치원군에 량어도 다 이내야 지금 가서데 튕겨 마상에 온게 튕겨 마상에 온게 아니 치견 잡으던데 용대데 아니 거야 튕겨 상와졌어요 도나 된데 치게도 매바지 차두고 와 치게 매바자 이내야 대상배 치원 매바 차고 요 말이야 치와 매바창 치와 매바도 거다 소토야 거나 매드 자 치와 매바도 가뒤 자그랬으나 아니 된대게 깨와지 된대 레뉴고 깨와지 까마도 거도 치와 매바 차으면 도와 된대 레뉴고 깨와지 까고 여바 이나 아니 아제 실레스바 숨고 세터바지 까고 도와 디까발라 아니 레사바지 까고 도와 레뉴고 레사바 디까발라 아니 가서데 단지 마리바 까고도 디까 마두고 봐도 치와 까두고 요마다 다 치와 까 마두고도 다 가르치고 왔으다 다 치와니 녀바래 남친이 녀매래 다 당다 요바티 구급에서는 디바 싸요는 다 샥동 제대 딜레 셔바 단데 내가라 요마다 구급 셔바지 민두와 다 된데 임바 인사 아니 디바 싸바티 다마치고 그래서 다 단다 조다는 디바 샥동 제대 갑리 맞아 다와치고 그래서 마시고네 아니 매바 소토가 지고 그랬어. 걔게 매바 소토가 뭐더나 슉충다 땅고 그랬어. 어다 저송도 왔거든.
So now we are aware that in the modern era, that through various medicines and interventions and so on, that there may be it's possible to kind of like really extend or delay the one's death, and so we see people living longer because of this. And it's simply not that life has been extended, but that the conditions for dying have become fewer compared to previous times, and that here when the actual time of death comes, there's nothing that can be done about it, and one can merely extend kind of like the inevitable, really. And that and also, there's no way that death has been stopped, that people are still inevitably going to die. This is just the fact of the reality of life. And that here, if we haven't done anything about our karma and afflicted emotions, death is always going to be inevitable. And if that on the back of the karma and the afflictive emotions, we haven't done anything about stopping craving, grasping, and existence, or karma, the imprints that are laid down, and they are laid down by the actions that we have done by motivating through grasping at the self-existent entity. Then we're always going to have that sort of the triumph, that reality of death. Death is always going to be inevitable, and that the time of death is always going to be uncertain. And so therefore it leaves that, when we go through the logic of it, it leaves only one stark kind of reality for us, and that is that we need to purify. There's no other opportunity available. There's no other out. We need to purify before death comes to us, and purify as intensively as we possibly can, to at least reduce the power and potency of the negativities on our mind stream.
that niba digwa madana che deni do ya da ga chima la dunga nyu she mo go cha che deni do ya 동해 연구 발라 숨제 대과 맞아는 소체베 동해 니셰 소지 좀 민네 봐 그래 안에 소나 마 가서 소나 마제베 지과 안에 교배 동화 좋아 오저 당분님 다 간제제 대과 맞아는 소체베 동해 니셰 소지 좀 민네 봐들라 민네 봐 니사 자왈레 다지 다니 맨나 두셰도 니셰 군제 타고자 소셰 빠지 소한다 다니 지구 용화죠 신제 폰에 심발라 니게 집에 셰집해
So the next outline, the second of these, that if we saying that if we do not purify our negativities, then we will have to experience suffering even in this life. And this has three subheadings. The first of these is that if we do not purify negativity, then when we are suffering, the suffering of our life being taken away from us, then our friends and relatives will not be able to have no power to do anything to protect us. The second of these is that the fear that arises through not having accumulated virtue. And the third is the torment of regret. So the first of these, that is that if we do not purify negativity, then that even at that very point where we have the suffering of our life being, being separated from our life, that our friends and relatives have powers to do anything to protect us. Verse number 40 and the first two lines of 41 read, "While I am lying in bed, although surrounded by my friends and relatives, the feeling of life being severed will be experienced by me alone. When seized by the messengers of death, what benefit will friends and relatives afford?"
그래 다 간제 다 가서 최 맞네 다 지금 최 제마도 맞네 다 간제 저거 디분지 조서 들 제마도 최 맞네 안 치외체 다는 맨날 도시도 저도 다 지금 가서 다지 가서데 다 친해 포하잖아 봐 지가 나가들라 맨날 도시도 다 간제 소소 내산을 하는 도시도 nie셰 제동자 소소다 오늘 저와 야부 요게 저와 야부 요게 제동 저 군제 타고네다 소지가 초하다 동네 다니 기분요다 되게 sem라다 이제 저 가서데 저 가서데 소소는 자와다 되게 요르데 지금 요르데 이나야 동네데 고시자에 그 소수 주고 요야로와 또도 되게 뒤와 동네 태바 소지래 코란족의 동네 용거 소수의 동네 용거 소 차대보다 동네 다 소수 동네 소수 주고 요야면 탑지 가야만 다니 지구 용어 주고 마세 아니 대녀가 가서 소수 동네도 대단해 동네 태바 소디도 아니죠 그럼 다 좋아 용어 주고 마세 소수 동네도 관심이 소수라는 거 요야 아니 지수로의 신제 폰의 심발라 로다 심발라 니게 집에다 니한테 주가다 니제 아직 소소 동네들 팬도스 가요 말아 그래서 니에시게 가서다다 니게 집에 봐 야, 다 자세된 저게 자 집에다 다 소소게 최제 제요나 아니 되게 집에 도고요 다 소소 지금 롯데 버리지가 저쪽으로 왔다 이제 최는 제대로 봤다 되면서 다 최바시모도 생각이자 팬도가 용거 매우 인사 아니 다 간제 지금 왔다 간제 디바 다예체도 다 단단히 배춘 치고려 숨고요 왔다 디지 팬도 그랬어 그디 시간 나갈 봐 이유네 다 시에다 거다 쥐어잡을 이나 다 수주 강요 지용의 제와이 야다 쥐 제와이 삼삼전에 거기 롯데병 안에 저초에 좀 그러다 근데 이면서 왔다 수평들을 쓰는 다 최지 제도나 디평들에서 아니 최제발을 야고지 줘 소지 비공 계정 야다 디과 사바데도 마샤동제 야고잖아 시간라다 남라 중요해요 디면은 다 지금 레년바지를 참 전에 아니 개왕이 바질 개와이나 계획들라 땅고 남자 슈 전부 용해다 아니 나와 민자와 차롱해다 근데 망고 용고유도 딱 앉아 지금 가서데 소소가 지금 대부분 제로 약부 줘나 근데 가야 매바잖아 아니 지금 가서데 딱 지금 가서데 삼로데 시대 바베를 용고유 같은 남자 중간데空이라 되는서 최바시모도 先可以讲里面说下吧我讲
So this verse and a half are talking about that if we do not engage in spiritual practice, then at the time of death, when we're at that point where there is no hope, we're on the deathbed, and that we, even though we're surrounded by our friends and relatives, those we have, had a good connection with over life and so on, that they are all there. That's, in one way, it seems like a good thing, but they can't do anything for us. That we have to go through that process of the life being severed from us alone, and that they can't in any way be of benefit. So it's kind of like, we have to understand that we can't share out the suffering at that point. That's something that we have to go on alone. And in fact, maybe their presence is creating even more suffering because we become aware of being separated from them too. And so it's really, this verse is saying, what must you do then? You must purify now with haste, with sincerity, with intensity. And so, because only that will be a benefit to you, as it says here, that, at the time of death, because also, not only that you have to experience the death yourself, but that, this fear that arises when these messengers of the time of death, grab you and take you, that sort of image, kind of like of losing everything, like having to go on, and then your friends and so on, relatives will be powerless to do anything. Only the Dharma will be of benefit to you there. Nothing else will be of any benefit. And so this is pointing to you, the course of action that you should take as well. So now is the time to get into the Dharma, and that now is the time to purify and to try and be able to be in that situation at the time of death, at the very edge of death, with a peaceful mind, so that your virtues can ripen. Because otherwise, that with there's so much fear in the mind that it brings forth these fearful apparitions that will, really be, say, not good for our future prospects. And so, kind of like in purifying like this, we're putting ourselves at peace. We have peace of mind at that crucial time. And so it's very, very important that we purify now.
다가 제 소소게 소남 야고 사요나 소남 사발라 때네 아니 류대와 요구여래 안 다가네 시 소소게 아니 삼로 당당이 개바지 마이나 삼로 당당이 개바지 마이나 아니 딜라 때네 이대와 요구여래 좋아 이대와도 삼로 당당이 개바딜라 때네 요구여래 삼로 당당이 야고지 신거여나 최다 tumba 삼로 당당 가서 다가 로종 거를 삼로 당당 야고지 신거여바는 강에 거지 채바이네 셈 시대 요구여래 셈시대 연구를 근데 가서다 준준아서 케베인 가서 케바인의 셈대 가서 셈대나서로 다가자 다들 가서 케바스근데 케바문에 임바이나 아니 셈시대 연구를 해서 뭐예요. 그래서 숨도와 소남이네 류달 소남 사바지 임바이나 아니 류대탄 연구를 했어. 다 소소 류대단을 때는 소남 사바 인데 소소군의 케바 임에데 셈대단지 도움도 때는 소소 케바 임에 되는 사 소들라 서티피카 망고 예매 켜봐 예매 말이 켜봐군에 이나 강에 근데 켜봐 있는 셈 시대전 대도도나 오다 슝첨번에 송에 켜봐드렸다 켜봐디 차대거라 다 데데도 왔다 데데 임바 인사 소속에 삼로 땅땅게 토네 아니 시대 내통지 좋아 아니 소남 사발할 때는 류대단 내통지다 소에디 다 소사 집장다 요구도 와 So
more specifically, the practices of accumulating merit and purifying negativities are very helpful to say that through merit, one is able to sustain a peaceful body. And so one is not like racked by physical suffering in that sense. And even so, one is able to remain relaxed and unagitated. And it's saying that one who is an expert with thinking can sustain a peaceful mind. And so this is like having somebody who's really trained in mind training itself. They can really control their thoughts no matter what the problem arises. That peace of mind is not disturbed. And so at that time of death, especially, this comes to the fore. And it's very, very important. Because they become the master of thought in that sense is somebody who is able to remain at peace, regardless of what's happening around them. And so this is nothing to do with, having degrees and certificates and so on. And it's the one who's able to remain cool while all about them is chaos. And so this is the best qualification to have. And that one comes by that through the twin process of purifying negativities on the one hand and accumulating positive merit on the other.
What did it say? Shumado Kanija, maybe knows that I get ping Maris, what did it? Tendenza Tanda de Lamrim Dezinala, Chuamidabo, Kamakato Sugudo, Chua Nieva, Namching Yeme. Chiwe the Chumado Kanja me pembas, and the Jumza sum donna teacher, and the Jumza sum gutane, and that Taja was some leonte, and Chua Yeva insa, Chuba Tache. And the Casa Namji Yeme insa, Chetana and Juba Tache. And Chiwe the Chumado Kanya me was, and that Chija Karjava and Chokana to a Tache Escatwata. What is it? That's Tom Chimboridwa. Tom Chimboridwa.
And so that you remember in the graduated path teachings where it discusses the process of death and the impermanence in the form of death in quite detail, where we learn about the three main principles of death: that death is definite, that the time of death is indefinite, and that only our spiritual practice will be of benefit to us at the time of death. And they are further divided into three other aspects related to each of these principles, where after which we come to a certain conclusion. And so after contemplating the certainty of death, that we conclude that we therefore must engage in a spiritual practice. And that's the only logical outcome. And after contemplating that the time of death is indefinite, then we conclude that we must begin that process of spiritual practice, and now without any more delay. And after contemplating the third of these principles, that only spiritual practice will be of any benefit to us at the time of death, then we dedicate ourselves further into being able to transform all of our activities into spiritual activities.
What that the name that Chokana to touches the Gomdam there, the country and the Kijamarata, so Nisha to the Chieganga and the Cheda to transformation chasing. The Getchimodua. The actual Shabbat Chikaya, somebody said the Kijamarba, so Jay Digete and Cheda to Bachieta, and the Digeta and the Caso the that church to be Tungela Bejutan. Rwada, that the Google Suetre. Timedo, that church is the Samotanda machine, Capricabre, and the Pusut of which was to any Gadwa. Pusut of which I got Timber, so Chicago there. That Shoga Yalang and Gota Mani, but Taka, so the Javachica, Simja Janjari. And the into Taka Simja that Javachi, the children to Javachi. And the girl church to be Tungel Bejutan, Tijana, and so the Sayato the Yalan, Sayato and Ye, but the church to be Tungel Bejutan to a Jugudua. But this Sanga Join and the church to be Tungel Bejutan to it.
So this must be clarified a little bit, especially in terms of the last conclusion coming from the requirement to kind of really understand that only the spiritual practice that we have done will be of any good to us at the time of death. And so it's saying here, yes, therefore, to do only spiritual practice, but it's in that sense of that is to drop everything and just engage in prayer and meditation and do nothing else. That wouldn't be that skillful. And also it kind of make you very tight-minded and ultimately probably depressed. But that, you have to learn how to transform the ordinary things of life into spiritual practice. And that's something we can do. We really have an opportunity to be able to do that. That makes sure that whatever we are doing is in harmony with Dharma principles, and that that we are constantly meeting with sentient beings throughout the day, and that we can ensure that our connections with them are good, helpful, beneficial, harmonious, and that we are doing so in accordance with the Dharma, and that what we are, when we are eating and drinking, when we are getting up, and whatever we are doing, all that good that arises in our lives, all that is bad that arises in our lives, we can connect with the Dharma principles and transform into Dharma practice. This is something that is within our own hands, within our own control, and we can certainly do it, especially when we are kind of greeting each day as a great opportunity to do so.
다 가서래 지혜들 교다 시다 요도 당고에 샤 요거 다 가셔도 요거로 와면도 다 개치주의 삼로 당당의 교다 냐마데 랑기 체도 지금 여 봐. 다 생기 체도 삼로 당다 다 자체도 당거 봐. 냐마 랑제지 온게 다 현제지 온게 체. 보다 삼로 당다의 교다 해지. 액션 라운드 쇼 다 가셔 액션 교다 당거 군에 심지어 뇌세 교다 군에 줄로 가면 So we
have to see too that a great deal of what comes under the umbrella of Dharma practice in this context is not confined, but is reserved to the way in which we actually think. What's going on in our minds? This is the important part, and that it's always like when we have a thought that we are transforming the kind of emphasis that was formerly, for ourselves to the emphasis being for others. When we have that thought, oh, this is for others, or the kind of like contradictions of working through our own self-cherishing, now we're swapping that for cherishing others. What we are thinking, what we are intending is for others. Of course, some of this will play out in positive actions, which is great as well. But we have to understand that this is a mind training thing, that we are being able to really confidently, proceed throughout the day where we are within that kind of a mindset of the Dharma all the time.
But sozo kala saete sozo sugu detayo sozo sugu yaboyo sugu zangma zangdanya ete sugu detayo dadi da kaja semjeng ge deon zhuwala sugu detan gogudu semjeng ge deon zhuwala energy yabu gogudu right? But that is ya ko kala sae chiba chija de samlo tangda ge kulong minta kulong de nuba chijo jogudu.
So a simple example is that previously we were eating in order to kind of satisfy our hunger, to keep the body going, keep ourselves healthy, and so on. Now we simply adjust the motivation for food. That now I'm eating for the sake of other sentient beings, so I can have the energy to dedicate myself to helping, benefiting other sentient beings. And so it's the food is the same. We've simply adjusted the motivation.
아니 딜레데네 아니 심제샬 뉴그데 삼사 아니 수부장만 야고야 알소서 수불을 답에다 지 퍼핀다 잡아 맞잖아 디마 소바카나 심제심발 뉴그데 안 디지도 퍼핀 주에 잡았다 딱 가이네 연구로 왔다 가서 셴뱅게 체도 제주고도 왔다 다다 제데 소소 디마 심부 가야다 미 약보 통해져도 제원도 아니 란제즈 레고도 다 소소 그 퍼핀 주야다 디게데 디 맞잖아 디마 소바샬 가는 거 녀바다 셰라 아니 녀주고도 셀라 년나데 rungu 말에 아니 디체도 있어도 가서다 장바데 닝제 심베게 아니 퍼핀 주에 좀 것도 와 어떤 거다 딱 셴뱅게 체도 제 좀 그러다 그래서 가게 봐도 와.
So that means that everything that we are doing, even such mundane things as provide or applying perfume or anything like that, we can change the motivation for it, so that it is a valid action if it's going to be a benefit to others, that they will enjoy that, rather than the motivation, oh, I'm applying perfume so that I will be liked by others. That is a self-cherishing motivation. And so here we do so out of love and compassion, and so that others may get some joy, get a feeling of satisfaction out of the aroma or anything like this.
So
also, you may be trying perfume so that if you don't, others might not enjoy and your natural smell of the body. They might be offended by it. So many of these actions, they look the same either way, but you have simply, you are working on the basis of benefiting others. That everything you are doing is motivated in order to benefit others. That's the transformational part. So then the second half of verse number 41, which reads, "My merit alone shall protect me then, but upon that I have never relied." And this is to cover the subheading of having not engaged in creating merit, I am now fearful. And so this And so then this is quite clear that at that time of death, when these messengers of the Lord of Death grasp one or grab one, basically the Lord of Death, and that at that time, then they have, we could have a refuge from our going for refuge from our abiding in ethical conduct, from the different kinds of merit that we have accumulated, which would be the supreme refuge or protection at that time. But we haven't done that. And therefore, this great regret arises for not having engaged in Dharma practice. So it's kind of, this is not referring to those who don't accept the spiritual practice of any kind, and that how they die or don't die is kind of like neither here nor there, but it's really referring to us so-called spiritual practitioners who have gone for refuge, have accepted the principle of spiritual practice as being helpful, but haven't bothered to engage in it. It's really showing then that you have this tremendous regret at the missed opportunity of not doing what you had set out to do, really, and that therefore this is what it's about for us, is kind of pointing this out. Don't fall into that trap. Then diga di gebe gyu chagirwa yina ya da chö kellena da malenda soso digba sasona chö kellengi mesen digba saya mewa mare chö kellengi yona kellengi mena gaya kewa mate nejo lore da yina ya
choi kelle ba yina choi kelle be tole chudim kelle ne ane mason wege ane chebe khana ma to be nyaba chugu yorba ranse khana ma to be gangal yongor pero so chela nyaba choi kelle ma le ga ba gangal yongore loyeng nyaba gangal yongore 다 가서도 가서도 가래 다다데 bana 마진랭이 녀바데 수에체바 최켈랭게라 요 말랭가 말 최켈랭게라 마진베 랭이 녀바데 가서 제와 이나 마진베 레메 녀바데 제바 하나마도 라시 하나만 녀바 니가 용구요 얘나 최켈발랭가라 제바 하나마도 용구요 말때 이네 라시 하나마도 용코자 내조 로르마다 용구요 최켈말레나 아니 저 렌데 용거 매봐 최켈레나 렌데 용거 되네 말다 이나 단다데 가서 시간 나가라 됐어야 가서는 그 최도 신거 열받다 신거 열대 이네 자왕 년생게 렐로다 길루벨렐로 온게 아니 제라 제고 자 아니 잠을 레온도 제마도 봐서 교바기가 쓴 거야 봐 어디를
And so here, yes, it's you're really understanding, that once you have accepted the Dharma and accepted the spiritual practice, that the kind of like the consequences of not really having then followed up on that acceptance, that responsibility, that opportunity, will really weigh heavily at this time of death. So therefore, this great regret that arises through not having engaged in spiritual practice. Because, we have, however, accepted the past and future lives, perhaps. We have understood the idea of the law of cause and effect. However, through laziness, primarily, the laziness of engaging in negative activities, the laziness of a sense of procrastination, of always putting it off, I'll get into it once I finish such and such a project, or I'll get into it at this time, and so on. And meantime, death is coming closer and closer and closer, and then the day arrives, and you find that you haven't, followed up on your promises. They've been empty promises, and again, so tremendous regret through knowledge there, through knowing, but it's not like that those who don't ever accept a spiritual practice, they get off lightly or something at the time of death, and they don't have to experience the consequences of their actions. Of course not. There are the negativities that are accumulated through natural law. The law of cause and effect, that they are naturally occurring negativities. But if we as spiritual practitioners have engaged in specific ethical practices, then we have also got the particular we are abiding by the ethics, the avoiding of negativities as prescribed by the Buddha himself, and therefore if we contravene these sets of ethical practices, that we are accumulating negativity not only on that basis, but also the naturally occurring negativities, and so it's saying that there are no exceptions to the law of cause and effect. It applies to those who don't engage in spiritual practice, as well as those who do. But in our context, we have to be aware that if we're abiding by ethical conduct, where we're avoiding certain negative practices, and we contravene them, then we're accumulating an extra set of negativities on our mind stream.
What did it? Takajana Rua Penachawina, Chikaso the Chokelana Malina, and Kawa Mi Kawa Lebala, Sudim Dina and Socheva, Sudim Maswala, Mi Kawa Lekora married. Mi Kawa Lekora you married. And it's a long joy, so what the natural Chima Matana, long joy, you married. 아니 수 인도 하보다 수 상부터 용하라 서바 교세와 마고 말아 용해 거라요 말이 가요 말 다들 거라 집에 롱주 팀기 돼서 집바 땅올라 때는 롱주 용거래 수좀 송올라 때는 하다 미 고만 더 그래 아니 서바 고올라 때는 수다 인도 하고 용거래 쓰게 되게 그 가릴 때는 용거였으나 디 릭트베 되고 용 되겠지. 이 산재의 송모서 개발된 내절 로르다 최켈라나 말레나 수 가서 겨 가서 하다 미 고마 토에라 중에 봐도 되는데 상고해지. 니아바도 가서 수림 돈을 연구 학교도 속주 방에 수림 돈을 연구해. 아니 롱줄라 소바디가 지바타올라 돈을 연구해. 수 다 인도 가고 되게 아니 소바고 말할 때는 연구해. 그다 최켈레말 갈 때고 조다샤 다 조다데 이마다 나라 그 셰투고 매바 인자. 나라 저 뻑투고 매바 아니 상계기 켐베 돈에 아니 롱대어 여러다. 근데 제가 속에 답을 롱차 되어 봐. 이 롱체마 차대어로 제가 속에 다 쓰도
And so, of course, when virtue is engaged in, and one still accumulates the merit for that virtue, whether or not one has taken on a vow to, say, for example, avoid killing. So just simply avoiding killing is accumulating virtue. But of course, with the vow, there's a kind of extra level of virtue that is accumulated because of it. And that here, the same way in terms of being generous. So one is generosity is a good thing, whether one has taken a vow to be generous or not. And that, as it said in the Buddha scriptures, the validly established scriptures of the Buddha, that through generosity comes wealth, through good ethic conduct, one can enjoy rebirth as a human being or celestial being. Through good practice of patience, one can enjoy a pleasing appearance. And so these are all quotes from the Buddha's teachings directly. And so this is like a natural law. It's not necessarily just because the Buddha said so, but it's a naturally occurring thing. And so here, of course, to be born as a human being and as a celestial being, one has to establish the causes, the specific causes for that, particularly as well. And that's the way in which it comes about. You know, it's kind of like in a way that there are sort of aspects, of course, of the Dharma that are purely, universal in that sense, and not specific to a particular line of reasoning. So the next of these outlines is the torment that arises from regret. Verse number 42 says, "O protectors, I, so unconcerned, unaware of such terror as this, accumulated a great deal of negativity for the sake of this transient life."
아니 미다지 미데베 세디에서 딱가저 체도 체 다도 디바망부 체디 체디 체도 디바망부 녀와 주베다 디바망부 사네 다 교도 셔바워서다 다디 디바사바디는 소주케도 조조데 아니 체디 딱가저 체도 다루와다 체디 아니 체도 딱가저 딱바떼바리슈 삼르타네 아니 디체도 딱가저 디바망부 사 디바망부 사바데 딱가저 딱가저 re ta kanja je ta digwa digdo sosu kene choju re an den ta 정보 시험은 다 가야 된지 매번 차오라 다 패도 가야 매겠지 패 마도 갈라다 너무 봐도 매번 용거 못을 동에 용해지 다 뒤쳐야 되는 교도 시험하고 쳐
And so oh yes, this verse then is saying really this a heartfelt appeal to saying, you know, all objects of refuge are protectors. I being kind of like lacking any conscientiousness, not really thinking about the consequences, the fear of the lower realms, etc. It's not just being unaware of, but not properly contemplating this possible consequences of my actions. I engaged in negativities, you know, and again, not understanding the impermanence, the unreliability, and the fleetingness, the transience of this life. And so now I'm left with this terrible torment of regret because I have wasted really my life. And so I've engaged in so many negativities in that sense. And so it's like this kind of blindness that with which we approach life, engaging in negativities by grasping at the permanence of life, the opposite of understanding its impermanence and transience. And so therefore we've kind of engaged in so many negativities, harms, and there has been no accumulated benefit.
다 교도 시험 간제 저거 간제 세디 다 소소의 년예도로 사회 체도 제와 이내다 안 소소의 아니 저거 다 간제 류의 체도 제와 이내다 다 간제 소소의 또그땀 근데질 제와 이내다 데데기 체도 다 디바 먹고 사네 다 로다 체데 내가 지금 임바데 마신 받체네 다 간제티 마시 받잖아. 아니 대체도 디바 봐도 사. 문에 전에 팬 거에 디와 치마 펜절 팬 맞고 디니 가야 두마도 받체. 두마도 배 갈라 디와 치마 펜절 무드의 동행 요에가 딱 유망부터 사요. 아니 교거에 차버렸다. 교도 시험어서 what 쳐.
And so in short, it's really kind of like saying misunderstanding the importance of this life completely, where you know we have engaged in so many negativity to sustain friends, for our own body's sake, even, you know, that they talk about, you know, that being dominated by the food, clothing, and reputation, and that these three dominate, and so we engage in so many negativities in order to sustain and accumulate, for the sake of this life only, not thinking about future lives at all, but being obsessed by benefiting ourselves in this life, and not really understanding what this life is really all about. And therefore, at the end of it, there's this tremendous sense of regret.
제가 집에 편제체도 지구에서 디바 싸고에 천문도 왔다. 제 뒤체도 제거도 아니 디바 먹고 싸고에 차도 도나지도 하고도. 제가 집에 편제체도 제다. 타바게 체도 제다. 탐제 김배체도 제 있으나 디바 조사 거라민도 와. 다제 뒤체도 차는 제들라 차온데 아니 제들라 차도 또그 땀라 차온데 아니 들라 또 구조 당했잖아. 아니 소소 마기바 차고도 와. 아니 들라들 레냐 먹고 싸기도 와. 안 디두베체도 작진샤 고고 땅에 요조치야 먹고 용되기도 와. 용되기도 와. 다 세치마 배도 제도 아니 요조시야 고고 땅에 작진샤 용할 거랍니다.
So it's this kind of lack of acceptance of the future, of future lives, of liberation, of the omniscient state of enlightenment, and this completely mistaken emphasis that we place. You know, we're saying only for the sake of food, clothing, reputation of this life. whatever else we insert there as being our particular obsessions for this life. And so, we engage in so many negativities on the basis of that, and that we kind of like, this is a sense of deception that we engage in, guile, deceit, and self-deception as well. That all of which is the kind of overall deceptions of this life. We're thinking, placing all the importance on accumulating all this stuff, of placing all this emphasis just on this life. Whereas when you are really have the emphasis on future life, on liberation, on the omniscient state of enlightenment, it really kind of like reduces so much the negativity that one can engage in, for the sake of the benefits of this life only, this kind of like food, clothing, and reputation of this life. It becomes kind of like, it really punctures the importance of all that. So that's something that really we should place, kind of like calibrate the emphasis that we place on future lives.
다 디바 뭐 제가 녀어 주베 아니 교도스다 교도스 다 되네 임바 인사 다 치갈하고도 들에 교와께다 단단하게 깨토바 제디 계셔보다 단단한 치외나바 검니 아니 치외나바 람르나 치외나바 검스 줘봐 아니 치갈하가도 우 땅당다 우 잭당다 디게도 삼로다 치외나바 검 아니 드네 삼로다 디바 제바다 아니 교와께네 안 단다 제바이나 샥돔 제디 교와이고도 봐 다 단단히 삼로다 모두나 아니 치와 가도로 다 교바라 잡았는데 그게 말바다 다 교바데 단단히 깨토바 이마이나 아니 단다 구급 도수 열봐 되네 인자 치와 고메디 개쳐버 예데 치와 고서 시그레 삼로다 아주 팽거도 와 되네 치와 거는 다 치와 고메 다 간자제 치와 녀바 남제 집에 다 치와 고메 아니 저 바소소 녀사날 하네 아니 우색네 다 치가 나가 되도 삼로다네 아니 되게 삼로다운데 아니 되네 삼로다운데 우마마 통통통통통 전에 다 아니 우리 뭐지 마 땅데 아니 야테마다 받다 아니 치와서 차도로 왔더래 거기 아니 대가도 다 소저 디바 사바 되게다 다 마도나 다 제부 그랬어 그래 어디 들으면서 그래 아니 샥좀 제중 그러 왔다 좋아 다 단단해 교봤다 지다 치외 가서 교바 끼고 요데 디펜도 보면 더 들을 끼고 됐을 거다 다 교바 단단해 끼 도바 임바이나 어느 거 샥좀 제를 편도 다도 근데 좀 먹고 수에도 가서 샥좀 제도 수고요 봐
And so that, we shouldn't wait for that time of death in order to start this process of purification, etc. We can reflect on death now, and that on the basis of that, engage in practice. For example, as it's pointed out in the graduated path teachings, where there is a much detailed meditation of simulating your own death, where you're on the deathbed, where the breathing is starting to slow down, where you have these long exhalations and then the short inhalations, and really go through that point. Don't just say, oh yeah, I'm going to die, I know I'm going to die. That's not going to be much good to you. To sit down, meditate in this way, where you're actually going through your own death at that point, where the breathing is stopping, the dissolutions are beginning, and then right there, do your purification, and do your purification right that's when you really feel it now. So you're preparing well in advance, hopefully, of that time of death. And so just like here, the emphasis all through these verses is to, really get it into your head to purify as much as you possibly can now. Also very much to bear in mind that it's very useful to relate whatever arises in the Bodhisattva's way of life as we're doing it to the graduated path teachings as presented in the graduated path literature, and to kind of really reinforce that message as you go along.
어디 dimado da de 어디 저 어다 치월하고 데 레고 서서 말다 다 용구 요바 인자 아니 데 용구 요바데 단단에 워터네 아니 워터고도 다 말아서 치외 넘버 검제네 치외 넘버 검네 아니 거치다한테도 삼로다는 워다 치 아니 지금 중시 dim다다 되게도 마 삼로다는 워다 치원 아니 거기 가서도 다 치원이 다 보겠다 똑바게 도서 치원이 다 똑바게 와이나 또바께봐 임마이나 아니 간지 진짜 쳐서 또 좀 와. 다들 어제 치와 미다바 똑바봐 깨봐 인자 칸에다 틱토브 먹고 시게 열때 틱토브 시아바 잠면도 아니 디 심귤 마 심투에도 요 마요한테 치와 미다바 똑바마 깨봐 들어봐. 칸에 치와 미다바 아래 지금 시그래 치와 내가 남친이 저 마베버 또 가서 리코딩 소리 잡아라. 얘네 되네 가서 심대교도 요 말이 초아도 요 말이 디메 가서 다도 검니 깨고 요 봐. 검니 깨고 디깨봐 얘나 다 되게 처음에 때문에 똑같이 깨봐 얘나 아니 지제 쳐서 저도 watch 연구로 와. 아니 되네 다 가서 처음에 때문에 똑같이 약보지 깨봐 얘나 되는 가서 처음에 때문에 똑같이 다 가서 가서래. 그래 다 가서 가서 다 가서 랍쳐 보시고 저고요. 다 최초에 사주 전부 용거라죠. 최초에 누가 전부 용도고 요 봐. 누가 전부 용도고 요래.
And so therefore, to not to wait for the time of death to, to put our little gems of Dharma into practice, but rather to bring that forward to kind of really recognize, that death is real, to meditate on these aspects of death now, and to kind of like really bring that as a realization of impermanence in the form of death into your mind. And to kind of like really see it that way, it's real, and that it's kind of important, and not to simply talk about death, just to kind of rattle off the different details of death being definite, of the time of death being indefinite, and that only Dharma will be a benefit to us at the time of death. That's not going to get through your kind of your mind, and that it's only existing at the level of speech. It's kind of paying lip service to that particular practice. But the benefits of really making death real for oneself now, where one really can feel that death is slipping away through the breathing, through the dissolutions, that that what is going to happen is for real, and really. That can only happen through meditation, through really meditating on it. Otherwise, talking about it is just like a recorded message. So it's very, very important that we are able to meditate in such a way that the mind is truly transformed, and that realization, if it arrives at that level in our minds, it has a tremendously powerful impact on actually how we do live the remainder of our lives.
다다데 가담 기제 부중하래 그래서 기제 부중하래 다다데 아니 콩게 리트널다 참수의 리트 막 출로페 나올야 차도 거기 틀들 아니 참아 동버지게네 아니 야 배도도 어디지 제고사를 삼서 마 배도도 제고사서 이내 촌 제거요 말이야 가서 아다 마도도 야는 야용에 마 하고요 말이야 샤샤 샤도 샤다 도지 샤다다 디발도 코엔데고 요자 어디 제고사서 아다 샤쇼 야 마용에 임다 하고요 말이야 어다 되네 전에 문에 다 처음 있다고 또밖에 드레스도 와 그래서 뒤주 졸라마당 게 좀 되게 또 뒤주 졸라마당 게좀 되게 또 하다 어디 다 되네 요거 되게 또 어디래
So, Geshe is recalling the story related to one of the Kadampa Geshes, perhaps Geshe Puchungwa, who was in retreat in isolation, and that in the morning when he would leave his cave or hut, he would always brush by a certain corner near the edge of the cave and think to himself, "Oh, I must do something about that, maybe prune it or cut it down." But then he would say, "Oh, no bother, because I don't even know if I'm coming back this way in a moment." And then on the way in, the same thing would happen, and he would think, oh, I must do something about that. But again, he would say, well, I mean, if I'm going back in here, I may not be coming out again. That's the stark facts of the matter. So as a result, his meditation went very well, and the bush remained where it was. So one of the immediate benefits of gaining real conviction in in death, that death is definite, there's no way around it, is that the many negativities that we engage in will be drastically reduced, because many of these negativities occur from a certain grasping at permanence in the first place. And so this realization or conviction in the reality of our death cuts through that notion, that false notion of permanence. And also, this certain realization of death and the impermanence in the form of death is extremely useful when we're confronted by somebody who harms us. That here, and normally, we would, that in the mind, there's this notion of sustaining that offense, and that, or then the idea of taking some sort of revenge against that person is kind of maintained. But when one has a realization of impermanence, one understands that the moment of harm is gone in the next moment. It's an impermanent phenomenon, and that one really is able to start letting go at the level of our own thinking. That this harm happened in the past. It's no longer present because that moment has passed. The impermanence teaches me that, and so there's a less chance we don't kind of grasp at the harm involved. So it's kind of interesting to note that many negativities will be stopped in this way, because of the fact that so many are connected with this grasping at permanence. And we talk about self-grasping, self-cherishing, but they are kind of in league with this fake understanding of the way of grasping at permanence as well. And so when you take that sort of like the scaffolding away in terms of really understanding impermanence, a lot of negativities fall away at the same time as well. 마치베 고라 아니 랑이 교바메바 지역을 교바메바다 가서다 돈다도 막 미닝풀 지역에 아니 국가 먹고다 티 국가도 툭토나 약으로 와. 와. 마도야 치월 국가 매나 다 치와살로 마다나 야버리.
다 국가 주 여바 이나 아니 국가 대 배주 마다네 아니 삼로 마다에 좀 생게 아니 배주 마다네 아니 배 통보로 와. 좋아.
So I understand that that is a very big sort of like issue in the West, and for Westerners, there's a lot of fear associated with it, and so that this is fine. It's normal, kind of like it's acceptable. But you know, it's kind of like the logic of it is that if one recognizes a fear ahead, and that one recognizes that it is inevitable that something is going to happen, then we can do something about it. And why wouldn't you do something about it to reduce that fear? You know, if we didn't die at all, then there would be no point in preparing for it. But the fact of and that you know that the fact that death usually presents some problem, some fear, and for many it's the obviously the most traumatic experience of life. And so and it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And so it's kind of like we have to see it more because it's the one guarantee that's going to happen to us as an opportunity. We know something is going to happen, it's definitely going to happen, and so why wouldn't we prepare for it? See it as an opportunity. And if we have that opportunity, then why wouldn't we prepare for it? That's the kind of attitude to take.
영에 타쳐 자도 또 다 빠져 our library도 와. 그거 다 무슨 미스 깨와서 여자도 거 치와도 영에도 빠져 library도 와. 다디 여자도 다 가르쳐 거스나 다디 된다 대바 제대 가르도 디 배주 땅도만 아니 뭐 미낭주도 딱다져 레드도 와. 다다져 레드도 와. 다디 인자 거도 그거 개발제도 와. 이네 치와는 셰고에다 개면도 와. 먼저 벽을 라마속에 송래 라마속에 치와라 미셰 깨워라 짜서 치워를 셰고요 말했어. 그 타쳐서 그 셰고 깨워도 타쳐요 말 가만히 기금에 하고 말해. 오늘 셰고서 깨워를 셰고를 치워를 셰고 말했어. 니네 치워도 못 쳐고도 뭐 맞으나 뒤주 돌아도고도 와. 들어봐.
And so it's kind of this initial kind of a step of really accepting death, accepting that death is going to happen, it's inevitable, you know, instead of this sense of denial that causes so much difficulty in the long run for people. And that, you know, we have to understand death is part of life itself. And therefore, you know, it's a real opportunity not only to make that death meaningful itself, but prior to that, to make the life that we have left to us meaningful as well. And this is the proper use of human intelligence. There's nothing more than that. And so it's kind of really important that we kind of can see this clearly, and to see that, you know, as the great masters say, there's no need to be fearful of death. It's going definitely to happen. There's no need to be fearful of it. If you want to be fearful of your future rebirth. That's where the proper focus of fear should be. And you know, you need to be inspired to do something about that. So, but death is guaranteed. No need to be fearful of. But we can, in our reflections on it, make our life, what we have left, as well as our death, tremendously meaningful.
And the name is Jambu Samladana, She Gosatilla, Mashabache, and She Mosatilla, She Devasua. Chua de She Gosa Mareta. 하고고도 하면 와는 먼저 그 뒤주트라도도 하고고도 이제 셰 과서도 말이 셰군에 과서도 깨와를 셰고 가와기베 하고면 될 셰고요 말이.
And therefore we need to know what to be fearful of and what not to be fearful of. And as we pointed out, there's no need to be fearful of death. We know, we are aware that death is going to happen. We can prepare for that. We can do something about that. But if we want to be, you know how to be fearful of this, where we're going to end up in the next life, where we're going to be reborn in the next life. We need to actually see what we can definitely do about that now.
어디 계셔 버려다 다들 먼저 당과 만노 왔지네 다 뒤쳐봐이나 아니 거서 개와 치마데 비다고 당과 만노 왔제데 아니 다른 치와 미다고 그저 삼로 땅토면 라래도 치와 미다고 삼로 야고 땅토여나 딜라테네 개와 치마 편제라 아니 저 개와 냥발에 개게 아니 주마두베 주두바티게데 아니 가서 녀부터 없이 거나 딱답지에 아니 교사도 nyamba matubi and did any jawa chimala and Luden Yago Junga Pando Yong chatting to that is Zako Tampa Manoa just Tirwata.
And so too, we see that we need to see the benefit of thinking this way and make the unmistaken choice. And so it's kind of saying when we are able to position death in its proper context, where it's not something to be fearful of, but that which is going to inspire us to make the most of the life that we have. And therefore, we're not going to engage in any silly negativities that we might otherwise have engaged in. We are already looking after our future lives. And so therefore, when we avoid engaging in so many negativities, when we are conscientious about applying the 4 opponent powers in our purification, then we're looking after future rebirths as well, and we're guaranteed a better, fortunate rebirth. So it's kind of like a. Fix something.
Le penangarazo tanda tomba shaja to bege and that penaloni don't have Jacola tomba namdal tenaguta tomba tabo and Jaga Gavujila Kutu Sazan sell Kutu and then tomba gave you couple of shoe and it can get them say Yabu Yorte and Namshina and the Machulo ma parent and Gango never shitoge then they see what and ngotene tachida toba ngane the tema chembe on the ngane sangye saneta chogudu na ba de pe gu yorde ina tumo duje nangola ani be ani chig dende sibe kenchene ani ta kaza de nyenjong tune ani ta de chig 가서 다 델레 다도 코아바 인사데 델레 동네 연구도 아니 코알레 마다나 지금도 공부 전에 아니 저게 코알레 타에 아니 나네 아니 저게 타바다 탐지 기면 고마 마주로 지금도 대자 타에 마게 심지 탐자 되면은 단데 개부 그 통계대에 권내갑 저래샤 남시나 아니 코야 동네 빠도 뭐ပဲ용해샤 아니 코 내가 매겐 저래샤 아니 근데 코 라시는 코아리샤 교회 동네리샤 어때 공부 전에 아니 디 개전에 아니 타바다 탐지 기면 좀 나도 탐지 기면 고마 좀 나도 이제 되다 아니 나기 기보다 망고지 이래 때다 남다도 때다 된대게 아니 저 가서 내바다 냠타와다 아니 동해 중와다 아니 시조와다 된대 저기 깨라 때네 아니 저 구마체 아니 된대지는 냠내 전에 타입에 막겠습니다 뭐 뭐시 누가 이거도 랑셰 임바데 샤마 전에 디 주다 되게 제전에 안디라 타답도 문도 제전 아니 여바데는 구급 생활도 아니 타입에 막겠습니다 편토에 되겠다 랍치 뭐 주에 도와
So in this regard, we need look no further than the life of Bodhisattva Muni Buddha some 2,600 odd years ago, who, to all intents and purposes and for like common understanding, was born in this area of Magda in northern India into a royal family who had excellent, conditions in that royal household. Very well off and so on, but at some time started to get curious about the outside world and was able to get outside the royal compound, and as we are told, experienced somebody who was old, somebody who was sick, and then thirdly somebody who was dead, and this inspired him to start reflecting. He recognized that what has been hidden from him was actually the natural way of things. This is what occurs in real life, and ultimately developed the renunciation, left the royal household, and started reflecting that this is cyclic existence. It's in the nature of suffering. So I must attain liberation from this suffering, and ultimately the state of enlightenment, in order to be able to lead all other sentient beings out of that state of suffering. And so realizing that the royal status is only a very, very temporary status. that it is going to change, because that is the nature of impermanence. Change is the nature of impermanence. So this is the way it has been. And we see the life stories of many, many, many holy beings too, who in the same way looked at the sickness and suffering and death and so on, and that nature of that, and asking the big question, is it possible to gain liberation from that, to get beyond just the normal, inevitable suffering that is here in cyclic existence? And in that sense, that's what really inspired them to practice and to gain that realization and to gain that liberation.
다 되다 저는 나라도래 알레 출로래 그래서 칠레 강가라 삼로 땅사도 나라도 소소리에 아니 저 로야 겐도 도고도 개베 동의 연구도 아니 나외 동의 연구도 타마치외 동의 연구 되게 된가 아니 삼로 땅에 아니 되게 쳐주베 다 통계를 배주 땅도 봐이나 아니 겹사래도
So likewise, we should emulate this in the sense that reflecting on our own lives and looking around us, looking at our own kind of aging process, and the illness and the sickness and so on, and to be able to see that as an inspiration for our own practice, to use that as the conducive conditions to get us to engage in spiritual practice. That would be good.
Oh yeah, that didn't shashaga.
So let's leave it at there for today.
What did it say? That do lama to almost said about teacher or that teacher and it rangichu takaja kasoda tan Nianjung Samloche Samlota, Nianjung Samlota, and then Nianjung Sem D. And the Casoda Takaja Rangichiwala and Tawaking Casado Pamatamacha Machu, some such a tenor, and the Casoda Chinaga Church country, you might you tend to do some your mother, son of Comashe. And what the legend and how don't do that and subject to Saja Kuma to be and not the Kawatse. Money but Tagaran, Kalasem Shan, Kachaka, something like Sem Sha, and it did and you make him watch it to some such a lot. And then Simja Tamja, Saja Kuma Madonna, Tamet, Tobachi, some start here, you wanted to Tobachi, so Kumasha, and then they get Lodi, some Lodi, then they go to Bati, and then Davaki watch it to some such a. And if I did a lama was a target to open with a Kadichibu Kusu to so, then the Sunday Chabana Tene, and it then Dula said a lama to with the Rangi Chibola, Tabuka Suchu, Nibuka Shu, Sumaka Tension, Sandia Komamato with the chairs so commercial.
So let's turn our focus again to reflect on the Guru Buddha that we are visualizing in the space in front and begin the process of preparing a suitable seat on our crown. And here, through reflecting on renunciation, and here, from that sense of wanting to gain a sense of definite emergence from this cyclic existence reality, arises the lotus disc mandala seed. And the self or the I that is endeavoring to do this, searching for this in the body-mind continuum, arriving at that point of the mere negation of the object of negation, and that emptiness, and that here arising from that is that which is merely imputed by thought, that sense of wisdom realizing emptiness in the form of the sun disk mandala. And then the notion of wanting to attain enlightenment, how wonderful it would be to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Seeing how one makes that personal dedication to do that aspiration to do so as quickly as possible from that bodhicitta arises the moon disk mandala seat. And so, having prepared this suitable seat on our crown, we utter the invocation verse thrice. At the end of the first, O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. The Buddha makes the journey towards our crown at the end of the second recitation arrives there. At the end of the third recitation, we have the certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment itself, and we can rejoice in that.
아니 야라도 만데다 저 풀로 다간제 코마도 바도 아니 심지어 산제 코마도 바도 저 소스 가고 겁네 아니 야라도 만데다 저 풀로 찾아와도 주저 저서 탑데 탑데 저주 치고 워스다 게도 컨디션 베네 개와요 말 어떤 삼로 야라도 만데다 저 어떤 간도도 고마시는 필요서 아니 되네 아니 사실은 조지보다 레랄이 이거 사이셔도 조금 남다 싶죠 이단 거는 달라가 니안 따야 메데다 잡아 어떻게
And that we offer here now the 7 limbs of practice, the offerings, the kind of like purification, etc., and the mandala, really with that certainty that the Buddha will remain with us, looking after us until we attain the state of enlightenment. That brings great sense of joy and confidence to the mind.
what are the nation and young some subject compassion and running the Pemata Josos and Nimada Tawade, Dojo to Shara compassion. And the same thing and gave a lot in it and Nimaking was Jus commercial. Tene and the subject of the Saja Mato top of the new Tomachi, some commercial, and then you want you to Tomachi, so commercial and the Caso that to Bade. And Caso de Davaki was Jus, and the Padezavella, was dining up with the addition of Kusu to the student and because of pet, Nibaka show, so because of Tedush, Sanja Mato, but the chair so commercial. And then I need the Ramata Malkatun and I'm doing that at the Sanga Kaje. And then and the Caso the best Sanga diet or monument to better monument mamas that or monument must require some job. Then Umara Bazana did Chabea Sanga the Scoret some job. Then they go yet on my head or Tadaka hair the Mashamana is so Tenga Korasumita, what did you use? Lama 12 was so of commercial.
And so then following the practices of the 7 limbs and the offering of a mandala, we again reflect on renunciation in the course of preparing that lotus sun and moon disk mandala seat at our own heart center in preparation for inviting the Guru Buddha down. And again, from that sense of renunciation arises the lotus disk mandala. And then the notion of the self, the lack of any objective existence there, of the mere imputed existence of a self-entity, becomes the sun disk mandala seat. And this aspiration to attain enlightenment as quickly possible to benefit all sentient beings brings forth the moon disk mandala of bodhicitta. And then we again utter the invocation verse, thrice, O glorious and precious root Guru, come take the lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first, the Guru Buddha begins the journey down through our crown chakra, down through the central channel. At the end of the second, arrives at the pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, is firmly established there, we feel, until we attain the state of enlightenment ourselves. Then the petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at the tips by a 5-pronged white vajra, and then further sealed by the encircling mantras, the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha in a clockwise direction, the mantra of wisdom of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination again in a clockwise direction.
And then Ravi Nigo Lamatua would never take Kusun to the West, part of our trainer. A Rangi Luchi can't take about a vessel to our tenant, and a Takaja Toma was debating my chances, such as Sochova, Majima number, Missao Chova, and during Thomas Sungaja, now said Mr. Lotala Sova, Takanje, Cheva Hanamatova, Raji Hanamato, never condition salary with her. Takani Shikaso, Sotaka Tomata Kawa, Chajusima Lava Takawa, Sanga Tamsita Kawa. Lasuna. What did they Takaja so Jachabo Casa time where you went? 파다 말라마고 전부 로블로도 조상바 주바도 먹고 다가 이제 지금 동샤다 지준날도 와다 내가 공부시했잖아. 이봐 그래서 딱 도나다 지금 타바다 탐지 캠버 터비에게 계속 주어 코와다 예송은 예동 간지 싸요 봐야 맞다. 타바다 탐지 캠버 터비에 아니 걔게 예동 간지 싸요 봐 대파 장시 다소 중수 선사 다가는 신경 소속에 아니 지금 가서 다 최주배 계제 루 아니 지금 대담해 봐. 류기 내단 그래서 대담해 봐. 이게 대마 장시다. 다가는 지금 셈라 강에를 가서 되게 되게 장시다네. 그러니까 루 아니 지금 가서다 딱 이제 지금 강에 가서 내나서서 가려 봐. 셈그 동에 가려도 봐장. 다 중식 커만요. 중식 커 뭐냐 배겨되게 봐장. 살롱 틸레 기억까지 봐장네. 아니 지금 가나 탄자 딱 봐라 자 봐시 차도 봐. 다 야고 시고 중수 어디로 가 봐시.
And so here then the from within the folded petals, the light rays begin to emanate from the Buddha Guru within, countless rays of light which permeate through and completely pervade our body-mind continuum from the crown to the soles of the feet, thereby purifying all negativities and obscurations that we've accumulated since a beginningless time. And at that, plus all the times we have broken the ethics of avoiding the 10 non-virtues, from the 3 of physical negativities, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, of the 4 of the speech emanating negativities, of lying, of harsh speech, of divisive speech, and idle gossip, and the 3 mental of malicious intent, covetousness, and wrong view. The infractions related to the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and the Tantric vows, and that anything which is a naturally occurring negativity, as well as all those that have been prescribed by the Buddha himself. And indeed, and we try to do this as kind of vastly as possible to include in the process of purifying negativities in general, all the negativities that we can think of and all those that we can't, to include them all in the process of purifying all obstacles to our attainment of a precious human rebirth in the future, of our attainment of liberation, of our attainment of the omniscient state of enlightenment, all obstacles to our engaging in Dharma, of being able to integrate that into all of our actions and all of what occurs to it, be they obstacles of body, such as illness and disease, or indeed problems related to our thinking, mindset. So all of this is completely rectified, purified, as well as the 4 elements, the channels and the winds and the drops, and that all of which has kind of become unbalanced in our body-mind system. And indeed also especially are holding this ordinary view in relation to all, and that is kind of eradicated and substituted for the pure view that we can adopt in all of our perceptions.
What did the chat? That and so should long the Yelenga, and then Lama Shaja say a good legit, so the Lama Shaja say a cool so the should send the language, Lama Shaja to the legit, so the same the Lama Shaja say to Jungle Lunga use of Lama Shaja say Kusu to make you so what did the commercial Lama Shaja say Kusun to 딱 그리고 두 갈래에서 빠도면 심지어 장단냐마 투반들 심지어 대다타야 라마샤야 구수도 뭐 예배 교수서 네 대다타자 안에 라마샤 딱까지 다베시도 교수 선서 왔는데 공부하셔 라마샤 딱까지 심지어 탄데 라마샤자서 그리고 왔다 안 뒤에도 수지 교와 가지고 소소의 제보가 유대도 말이야 동네 파다 점에서 뒤 대화 동반 대돈에서 이시 교수 서들 공부하셔
So then through the combination of my own most subtle winds acting as the substantial cause, with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of the Buddha. And through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And now I see my body, speech, and mind as inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being. And then shortly afterwards, then from seeing myself as a fully enlightened being, I now send out countless rays of light from my own heart center to all of the 6 realms of existence, and that the light there dissolving in through the crown chakras of all the sentient beings therein automatically purifies all their negativities and transforms them into fully enlightened beings. And indeed, the places in which they are also are purified of all fault, and they are transformed into the enlightened abodes of Buddhas. And um, and that having become cognizant of that, I am rejoice at having fulfilled the purpose of fulfilling the goal of attaining enlightenment and the goal of leading all other sentient beings to that state. I fully recognize that the all those sentient beings and the merit of leading them to that state of enlightenment, and me as the agent of that virtue, are all absolutely empty of any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. As a result of abiding in that reality, bliss arises, which combines with the voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not able to true existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the lands of snows, Losang Drakpa, at your feet, and make requests.
That's all. No,